Prime Minister Narendra Modi has left his hotel for his first official engagement of the day for the world-famous Terracota Warriors Museum of Xi'an. Now, the Terracota Museum is one of the biggest historical sites in Xi'an. It draws lakhs of tourists from all over the world. It was listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1987. The museum houses nearly 8,000 terracotta soldiers, 130 chariots and 520 horses and 150 cavalry horses, all depicting the armies of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. It is a form of art buried with the emperor in 210 to 209 BC, and the army's purpose was to protect the emperor in his afterlife. All right, let's cut across live now to TV Today Network's managing editor, Rahul Kamal, who joins us for all the latest. Rahul, it's over to you.
Thanks, Sanket. They say necessity is the mother of all innovation, and this is typical Indian style jugaad this morning. We're on our way from the Media Hotel to the Terracota Warriors Museum, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will reach in a short while from now. We've been stuck for a long while in Xi'an and China's notorious traffic, and therefore we've decided to go live from our bus. And let me just show you what's happening here. We've got lots of others who've got exactly the same idea, getting set, doing lives, Peoply lifestyle to some extent, from the bus. We're en route to the Terracota Warriors. I've got a whole bunch of journalists who stay in China, track China very closely, and I'll bring in my colleague Anand Krishnan. He's been reporting over the last several days for us. Kripal, if you can just move back a little bit on the Prime Minister's visit, and now the official leg of this journey beginning through the day today. Anand, is this going to be more about optics, you know, the visual spectacle of the Terracota Warriors, the Wild Goose Pagoda? But when it comes to the substance, what's really likely to emerge from this meeting?
No, I think, Rahul, the focus is going to be on the summit diplomacy between Modi and Xi. I think by the time the both of them fly back to Beijing this evening, they would have spent maybe 5 or 6 hours in each other's company, and this is unprecedented. It's the first time that a Chinese president has spent this amount of time with the Indian Prime Minister. Usually it's a premier to premier sort of equation. So it kind of shows that how they're prepared to actually break protocol as they try to establish a very close relationship between Modi and Xi.
And that is very substantial. Almost 5 to 6 hours time being spent between the President of China and the Prime Minister of India. As Anand was pointing out, usually you'd expect the Premier of China to be spending time with the Indian Prime Minister. Now, one of the things, Anand, that has really been a bit of an irritant here in China is the lack of progress since Xi's visit to Gujarat last year, when they discussed an industrial park, both the industrial parks in Vadodara and in Pune held up, land yet not being acquired. Are the Chinese beginning to get impatient with Modi and India? Are they expecting things to move faster?
Yeah, I think they had a very good experience in Gujarat, so they expected that this would translate when Modi went to New Delhi. But I think some of the deals have been held up and there hasn't been as much progress as we would have thought. So that's the focus of actually the Shanghai leg, which we'll see on Saturday, is we're going to have maybe 10 billion plus worth of agreements signed between different companies. So I think they want to work towards this 20 billion pledge that China made in September. And frankly, we haven't seen any of the 20 billion sort of materialize so far.
And the Chinese ambassador to India has announced just ahead of this visit that he's expecting that $10 billion worth of projects will be announced during Modi's visit. Now, one of the other key things, Sanket, that's being worked on is upgrading India's railway infrastructure. China wants to start a pilot project. They're conducting a feasibility study on the Delhi-Chennai route link. They want to either from Chennai to Bengaluru or Delhi to Agra have a trial project to showcase their high-speed rail prowess to the Indian people. Sanket.
Absolutely, and you filed a report also on that when you undertook a journey from Beijing to Xi'an on one such train. How is the bullet train or the high-speed rail corridor actually going to look in India? We'll play that story in just a short moment from now. Rahul, do stay on with us. We also have Smita Sharma joining us from the hotel where Modi actually made a pit stop at Shangri-La Hotel. Smita, earlier in the day when we were in fact discussing, you were talking about how, and Rahul also briefly touched upon this particular point, how this could quite much be about optics, about the fact that there is too much of photo opportunity that one can see in this particular trip of the Prime Minister. If you could really tell us in terms of substance what to expect, what really to expect from this three-nation tour.
Well, you know, there are two parts to foreign policy, really, Sanket. One, of course, is that public diplomacy, the outreach part of it, which, of course, is something that has become a signature style for Narendra Modi, you know, be it in his dealings with America, be it in his dealings with Japan, or, of course, with China as well. But as far as the foreign policy part of it is concerned, now, look, ever since the Modi government has come into power, we've actually seen very high-level interactions and very frequent high-level interactions happen. In fact, Chinese Premier was one of the first ones to really call up and congratulate Mr. Modi. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in fact, was the first ones to come into India to hold a talk with his counterpart, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj. And ever since that, there have been very high-level exchanges that have been taking place. But between India and China, you know, the relationship is like so vexed. It is so complicated. There is just so much of scope for collaboration as well, and there is so much of competition and conflict as well that nobody really expects an overnight solution. But in terms of the tangibles, really, you know, as Anant was rightly pointing out, that Xi Jinping has gone out of his way. He's spending a couple of hours with Mr. Modi in his home province of Shaanxi here in Xi'an. Having said that, in terms of the tangibles, we are hopeful of an announcement on electronic visas that will hopefully ease out, you know, that claims to ease out the visa process, especially so that more and more Chinese tourists and business persons can come visit India. Because remember, the bulk of the Chinese tourists globally is very high, but we do not get much share of it. But technically, a lot of experts, in fact, do suggest that electronic visa doesn't make much of a difference because security systems still remain in place. So MHA will still be watching out and still be keeping a track, perhaps, every time a Chinese really applies for a visa. So, you know, if you were to shaft out really the public diplomacy part of it from the foreign diplomacy, this trip is essentially about money. It's about economic, it's about monetary cooperation, some 20 plus government to government, business to business cooperations being signed. The chief ministers, in fact, of Maharashtra and Gujarat also accompanying the prime minister, looking at perhaps sealing a few more deals. But, you know, as is rightly being pointed out, that in the last 8-9 odd months, even when Xi Jinping was in India, despite all those announcements, not much has moved forward on the ground. So even on the contentious issues, while you've had the special representatives meet just recently, in fact, Ajit Doval was a part of this 18th round on the boundary dialogue. There is that 4,000 kilometer plus boundary issue, the line of actual control, perception differences, issue of incursions. These are all issues that will be on the table, perhaps strongly so, but a solution to it, not expected.
Absolutely. Rahul, I'm not sure whether you got that audio or you could hear what Smita was actually saying, but I want to ask you this. I mean, behind these photo opportunities, which is very good. I mean, it helps in people-to-people outreach, and it's quite pleasant to see how an Indian Prime Minister is actually reaching out to each and every nation. Wherever he is going, the reception is warm, and his, you know, the way he's reciprocating, that's warm too. But really, beyond that, what really should one expect from this particular trip? Because the announcements that were made earlier also, the whole thing about Make in India, I mean, this particular trip is also going to concentrate on pretty much that. But how much of that is actually going to become a little concrete on the ground? Rahul, what's your sense that you are getting from these days that you have spent there?
Sanket, this has been a deep concern for the Indian side. The fear that this visit will be described by critics and analysts as being high on optics and low on substance is something that's been bogging them down. They were hoping that there could be an agreement on China sharing river water data, real-time river water data with India. That agreement, I'm afraid, has fallen through. Will not be signed during the Modi visit to China, and the reason is the Indian side believes that China is concerned that if they were to share river water data, they'd have to accept that Brahmaputra is a part of India. They'd have to accept then that Arunachal is a part of India, and therefore they don't want to sign river water data. At least that's what they're saying in private conversations. But the real fear is that because they're building so many of these dams in Tibet along the Brahmaputra, therefore releasing real-time river water data would indicate just where those dams are, the kind of impact those dams are having, and that's something the Chinese side doesn't want. Now, Smita was mentioning the possibility of e-visas. Now, we've been able to learn from very good sources in the Indian government that that's a big logjam currently, because whether it's the research and analysis wing or the intelligence bureau, they've completely red-carded this project. They're saying it's way too dangerous for Chinese nationals to be given simpler, easier visas to be able to come into India. The MEA has been pressing, saying that e-visas follow essentially the same protocol. It just eases the bureaucratic logjam, and therefore it should be done. Now the ball is squarely in the Prime Minister's court. Will he go against the will of his intelligence agencies and say, okay, I will go ahead with the e-visas, or will he give in? One of the things that the MEA has been telling the intelligence officials in these private meetings is, even if somebody wants to come with a nefarious design for whatever purpose it may be, he's not going to come through the official route. But the intelligence establishment, and since they've grown up with this dogma, since they've grown up with these concerns about China,
we seem to be having some trouble connecting with Rahul Kamal, though it was a pretty smooth link so far, considering the fact that he's traveling in a bus and he's moving towards the place where the Prime Minister is. But let me come across to you, Smita. You were hearing what Rahul was actually saying. He mentioned that there is a valid fear. There is a valid fear that, you know, there will be criticism that this is too high on optics and too low on substance. But really on the contentious issues, are we to expect any form of progress? Perhaps, you know, heightened engagement or more engagement, or fast tracking of the entire process, where the, you know, this committee that is formed between China and India that actually looks at the contentious land boundary issue will actually fast track this entire issue, perhaps meet more often.
Look, Sanket, you know, as far as the boundary issue is concerned, it's the middle sector which has been sorted between the two countries. But really, the eastern and the western sector that involves, you know, portions of Ladakh and also Arunachal Pradesh, which in fact China has been now increasingly referring to as South Tibet since 2006. That has been another problem worrying all the Indian strategic experts there. They also seem to suggest that, look, at Pakistan's involvement, China's involvement in neighboring Pakistan, and especially in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Remember, if Barack Obama came to Delhi, he witnessed the Republic Day ceremony as India's chief guest. We also heard Pakistan, in fact, trying to get in Xi Jinping as their chief guest for the National Day. That did not happen, but Xi Jinping ultimately, in fact, did visit Islamabad. He had been postponing this trip for a bit now, but clearly, you know, you have to connect the dots when he goes in following the Obama trip to India, and also those announcements. While, of course, that $46 billion pledge that China, in fact, did announce towards Pakistan, towards a lot of rail links, road links, infrastructural projects, a lot of them, in fact, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and also towards sale of around 6 to 8 submarines. Some of those figures are being looked at with a lot of skepticism. But despite that, there are, of course, these partnerships that continue to be dominant when you talk about the foreign policy between these two countries. Experts in India allege that, of course, you know, China has been planning to encircle India on its own maritime backyard, that it wants to play a more dominant role, especially in Indian Ocean. It is really that jostling for space in the Indian Ocean, which links into the other maritime conflicts that China has with its neighbors like Japan, Vietnam or Philippines. These are the issues also that one needs to keep a watch for. You know, sometimes we get lost in these short-term agreements that we are focusing on, but these are the larger issues that one needs to look at, where, of course, we'll have to see how much of a tough position can Mr. Modi really take in when he talks in with Mr. Xi Jinping as well as with Mr. Li Keqiang.
Let's absolutely, Smita. I think we have Rahul Kamal back with us. Rahul, I'm itching to ask you this. Is there any cooperation or a memorandum of understanding in the telecom sector that is expected? Because this is the first time that we actually lost the link with you, considering the fact that you are on top of a moving bus. All right, just when we remarked, we seem to have lost that link because the bus is moving. Rahul is, in fact, going to one of those venues, the Terracota Warrior Museum, where Narendra Modi will in fact be visiting. After that, he has restricted talks with the President, Xi Jinping, and then after that, he would be departing for Beijing for his diplomatic leg of the visit tomorrow. And day after tomorrow, we are expecting him to address the CEO's forum in Shanghai. So it's going to be a busy 3 days in China. Also, remember, it coincides with the fact that the Modi government completes 1 year in power in the country. So obviously, Narendra Modi has chosen that he will, in fact, be celebrating the first anniversary by working. So that seems to be a message that perhaps has been planned deliberately.